Welcome back to Couch Talk, everybody. I'm Joe, and right now I'm going to go over my top 10 list of favorite movies of the year of 2019. These aren't the movies that I think all deserve Oscars. These are just the movies that I got the most enjoyment out of watching, and it's going to range from all different genres. So here goes. Starting at number 10 is Uncut Gems, done by the Safdie brothers and starring Adam Sandler. It's really about a man that works in the Diamond District in Manhattan, and he's a real sleazeball. He borrows money from people to pay off other people, and he's constantly gambling with other people's money and getting himself into trouble. And this movie's kind of like how he gets himself, or tries to get himself, out of one of the biggest debts that he owes with some very dangerous people. I really love when movies cast actors that are known for one genre and make them do something completely different. Obviously, Adam Sandler is known for his comedic work, and seeing him go into something so riveting and something so transformative and way more serious than this was really magnificent, and I was blown away from start to finish by his performance. He gained the weight. They made his teeth look gross. Like, he didn't really have a different accent, but like the way he talked, like it was very like you'd think he was actually from that district in Manhattan. His performance really just blew me away, and I was actually really surprised that he didn't get at least nominated for an Oscar for this. He definitely deserved it, and like I said, his performance really just blew me away. This is a movie that was made to cater to the performances and not so much the story, whereas in a movie like 1917, that's a movie about the story, not the actors. The actors are there to further the story. In this, it's quite the opposite. The story is there to help the actor, and I mean, he was in every frame of the movie. He's just so good. He's so riveting, and it's unfortunately not getting the recognition it deserved, but like I said, I love movies where they subvert your expectations with the characters that they pick to play these roles, and I think he deserves more recognition than he's getting for it. If you haven't seen it yet, I think it's coming to Netflix soon, actually, so you'll be able to watch without actually having to get off your couch and rent it or spend any money. So there you go. My number 9 is A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, starring Tom Hanks. He plays Mr. Rogers in this, and I never grew up watching Mr. Rogers or anything, but I always heard stories from people that he was just a really nice guy, and I never understood the extent of who he really was as a person, just that he was really friendly with everybody. And unfortunately, while I was watching this movie, I was going through a rough time myself, and it was one of those movies where they made it where his character in the movie is essentially helping the audience. And what I mean by that is the movie is essentially about this man who's kind of a reporter, works for a magazine. He has to interview Mr. Rogers, played by Tom Hanks, and he has to pretty much kind of figure out what makes him tick, and all the while he thinks he's interviewing Mr. Rogers, it's really Mr. Rogers in turn helping this man out of the rut he's in, because although he's a successful reporter, he's also struggling at home with his marriage and his kids and everything. But it's one of those movies where he's helping the main character of the movie, but he's also kind of speaking to the audience and anyone in the audience that's going through pain. At least that's what I got out of it. And just hearing some of the things he says in the movie, I don't want to spoil too much, because if you haven't seen it already, you definitely should, because it's a really uplifting movie, and it makes light of a lot of dark situations. And I remember just smiling a lot in that movie and genuinely walking out thinking things are going to be okay. And Tom Hanks' performance is always amazing, but in this movie especially, it wasn't super transformative in terms of Joaquin Phoenix with Joker or Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems, but he really nailed this performance. I remember when I left, I went and watched the documentary. I forgot what it was called. It was a Mr. Rogers documentary. I watched it right after the movie because I wanted to see how closely accurate his portrayal was to the actual Mr. Rogers. And, well, first of all, the documentary was fantastic. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely check that out. But overall, I mean, he was amazing in this role. He was amazing. The story was good. The setting was amazing. The score was just perfect. And it was this sad, happy at the same time. It's very rare where a movie makes me feel something so heavy and helps change my perspective on how I'm currently feeling, and I really appreciated the director's efforts into the finer details. They actually went to the same studio that he used to film, the real Mr. Rogers used to film his show, to film a segment in the movie that was a recreation of one of the show episodes, and I like when directors really have a fine attention to detail to things like that. The whole movie was flawless through and through. I really recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. Number 8 on my list, we're going to steer a little clear here from the serious movies, is Shazam, starring Zachary Levi. I grew up watching Chuck. I love Chuck. And when I heard he was going to be cast Zachary Levi was going to be cast as a superhero, I was really excited. But Batman is my favorite superhero of all time. But I'm not naive. I'm aware that Marvel movies have done a much better job than DC. I like Batman vs. Superman. Liked it, didn't love it. There was a lot of problems. Hated the way they treated Batman in Justice League. I can go on and on and on. I haven't been very happy with DC. But they released Aquaman and Wonder Woman, and they were good, fun movies. I liked Wonder Woman a lot more than I liked Aquaman. Like, a lot more. But they were still done under the head of like Jeff Johns and everything, and the old studio executive. It wasn't until Walter Hamada came on that he was the one that greenlit Shazam, and I was a little nervous to see what kind of direction this new guy would take it in, and I was like so blown away. Shazam is honestly my favorite DC movie of all time. It still has that like small dark element that like clearly Warner Brothers wants to keep with the DC movies, but it also had a lot of light and levity to it, and it made me feel like a kid again. And just seeing like, because every kid wants to grow up with superpowers, and it's like a wish fulfillment movie. Like, we get to see what a kid that got superpowers like Superman would actually do with them. And I thought it had a lot of heart. You know, a lot of the movie was touching on really how Billy Batson just wanted to find his mom, who abandons him when he's little. And I thought that was really touching, and they handled it very well, and they handled that, you know, the element of family very well. And, you know, family doesn't always have to be blood, and I relate to that very much so, because I don't have a big blood family, but I consider a lot of my friends, you know, brothers and sisters. So it hit a lot of right notes for me, and the action was great, the acting was great. I really loved everything about it. The humor, I loved the whole battle at the end of the movie. It was one of my favorite ending battles, aside from Endgame, obviously, that I've seen in a superhero movie in a long time. If you haven't seen this movie, definitely check it out. They're coming out with the Black Adam movie next, and then they're going to come out with the Shazam sequel, which I'm pretty sure is just going to be Shazam versus Black Adam. So if you haven't seen Shazam yet, check it out. It's definitely worth the watch. It is DC's best superhero movie to date. Although that might change, because I'm seeing Birds of Prey in a couple days. My 7th favorite movie of the year is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, done by Quentin Tarantino with Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Margot Robbie. I really wanted this movie to be higher on my list. I'm a huge Quentin Tarantino fan. I love that he could take two characters sitting in a room for 20 minutes, real time, 20 real minutes of our viewing time, and make it more thrilling than the most epic action scene. I remember that opening scene in Inglourious Basterds blew me away with how good it was, and it was just two people sitting in a room. And from that moment on, I really started to love Quentin Tarantino more, and I went back and I rewatched Pulp Fiction, because I haven't seen it for a long time since I was a kid. I loved it more watching it this time around. And then, you know, Django Unchained I loved. And I really, you know, going back and watching Reservoir Dogs, he just has such a way with creating sets where there's not a lot going on, but it's still so interesting. And Leonardo DiCaprio is my favorite actor of all time, so this was like a recipe for like my favorite concoction, and I did really enjoy it. It's not my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, but I did really have a good time watching it. It was a little too self-indulgent. It didn't really have like a story until like the end, where the whole thing with the Manson murders, which this movie has in the backdrop throughout the whole thing, really pays off in one of the best endings of a Tarantino movie I have ever seen. But like the first 2 hours, it was really just kind of watching two friends hang out and how they struggled through the trials and tribulations of, you know, an acting career. And it was one of the first movies I've ever seen of him that didn't really have like a story through and through from beginning to end. It was weird, but it almost seemed like he kind of just wanted to make something that was like two dudes hanging out. That's all he wanted in a setting that he clearly loves, the 1970s, one of his favorite time periods. You could tell that by the attention to detail and all the set designs and the spaghetti western era and everything like that. And like I said, look, I loved watching these two dudes hanging out. Like I said, Leonardo DiCaprio is my favorite actor, and seeing him play an actor acting in other things and what he goes through when he messes up a line and everything. The movie's hilarious. It has great acting in it, great action. I love seeing all these surprise cameos where people playing major people from back in the day. I forgot the guy's name. He's from Homeland, but seeing him as Steve McQueen, he looked perfect. This movie was really good. The set designs were really good. The soundtrack was really good. It was tense when it needed to be. It just didn't feel like a whole package, if you will. It felt a little like it had no direction until the very end. That's my only problem with it. But even then, like, if I said that about any other movie, I would give it like a 2 out of 10, you know? But I actually wound up giving this movie a 9 out of 10, because even though there wasn't that like compelling story the whole time, it was still really fun to see these characters act in this world. And I highly recommend it if you're a Quentin Tarantino fan. Just don't think it's going to be like up there with one of the best of his. Next up, another superhero movie, and that one is, of course, Avengers Endgame. This is the culmination of 10 years of being teased about this Thanos character. And I gotta say, the first 3/4 of the movie I thought was good. I didn't think it was better than Infinity War. I didn't think it was better than The Winter Soldier. I didn't think it was better than Avengers 1. But it was higher than everything else there. But it's that last quarter that's like, I never thought in my lifetime I would see that play out on a screen. I never thought I would see 30, whatever, how many characters were main characters that had their own movies and everything come together with B-level characters like Falcon and the Winter Soldier and all the other side characters, create this huge army and go to war with this colossal villain. And it was just orgasmic. I never thought I'd see this. I was in heaven. It was every fan's wet dream. It was every nerd of the superhero genre's wet dream. We're finally getting to see this showdown that we've been promised for 10 years. Something straight up of a comic book. Something straight out of the pages of a comic book. And I was just so blown away by how cool it was. Everything about it. Literally everything about it. From Cap picking up Thor's hammer to him wielding it and beating the shit out of Thanos for a little while, to thinking that Cap was going to die when it was just him versus Thanos, to seeing the best part of the movie on your left and looking at all the rings opening and seeing everyone that you thought was dead. I mean, we all knew they weren't dead, but just seeing them all come back out and get ready to go to war, and then finally hearing Cap say the words, assemble, and you see everyone charge the field as Thor does his huge battle cry, and like, I haven't felt like that ever in a movie, and I don't know if I ever will again unless the Justice League can get it right in 10 years from now. But that feeling alone warranted putting this movie up on my list. Like I said, it was the culmination of 10 years. I've been waiting for 10 years for this, and my God, the payoff was perfect. I loved how it ended. I loved everything about it. Everyone had the perfect ending they deserved, and I couldn't have wished for a better movie. The Russo brothers honestly did fantastic, and I can't wait to see what they do next. My number 5 movie is Parasite. Now, I remember seeing the trailer for this when it first came out, and I wasn't that impressed. But then I saw a lot of people talking about it and reviewing it, and a couple of my friends saw it, and I was really shocked at how much people were talking about how it's amazing and how the trailer doesn't really do it justice. And then I started reading more into the reviews and finding out more and more and more about it, and like, this is one of the things where I don't really want to divulge too much into the plot in case you haven't seen it yet. But this movie is messed up. I could not believe what I was watching at the halfway point of this movie. There's like a revelation that happens in the basement in this movie with one of the main characters. It's between two women. And from that moment on, my eyes stayed like this the entire movie. It's a drama about, middle class, upper class, lower class people, and like the hate that the lower class has for the upper class because the upper class doesn't understand how much the lower class struggles and everything. But it turns into a really dark, almost horror movie in the last half. And I remember there was a certain point where I was literally gripping my chair, like freaking out, not knowing what was going to happen next. And it's just, you don't expect that from the trailer. So I understand for people, anyone watching this that haven't seen it yet, trust me when I tell you that the last half of this movie is horrifying and in all of the best ways possible. I don't want to go into too much here, but like the title Parasite, it's so perfect for the story of this movie because this family is essentially a parasite. In the loosest of terms, I'm going to give little spoilers here. If you haven't seen it by now, stop this video, go and watch it, and then come back. But it's essentially this rich family hires this young kid to come and be a tutor for their daughter. And over the course of the movie, he slowly gets the rest of his family hired without this rich family knowing that they're all related. And eventually, it's this one whole family working for this rich family. And I don't want to spoil too much, but it's like they do some evil shit to get themselves hired at this place. And just the culmination of what happens at the end blows my mind. This movie deserves all of the praise it's getting. This movie definitely deserves to be nominated for Best Picture, Best Director. I'm surprised none of the cast was nominated for Best Actor because they're all phenomenal. I was blown away by this movie. It is easily one of the best movies of the year, not just on my list, but I'm saying like it Oscar worthy. Like it is deserving of all of the praise it's getting. If you have not seen this movie yet, please, and if you don't want to take my word, go and read up on it a little bit. Figure out if it's something you'd be interested in and watch it as soon as possible. Watch it before the Oscars if you can, just so you're all caught up and you know why it's getting all the praise it's getting. Number 4 is Marriage Story. I put this movie off for a long time because for a while I was like, it doesn't really strike me as something I'd be interested in, because watching the trailer, it's about these two people going through a horrible divorce, and it's about the struggles of love and the struggles of marriage and how they're going to deal with this divorce and also still co-parent their child, even though they dislike each other. And it's a very real movie, especially for anyone that's been in that situation, which I have not. I've never been married. But it wasn't until I went through a bad breakup that I was like, you know what? Usually movies like this find like the silver lining and kind of help me at least, out of ruts. And I finally was like, let me put this on and just watch it. And God, I cried like the whole time. Movies tend to do this thing where they take real situations, but they blockbusterize them or they Hollywoodize them. And what that means is a lot of times Hollywoods want to take real life stories and make them more exciting. They'll take something that really happened, like a true story, but they'll put like some sparkle on it and make it more exciting and more Hollywood, and they'll add things that didn't actually happen just to make it better, just to make it a better watch for the audience. And I mean, they do that with with not true stories too, obviously, but they didn't do that in this movie. It all felt very real and very genuine. There was like one thing that happened in the movie that really like hit me hard, because like I said, I've never been married, but I could understand and relate to some of the things these people were going through, like trusting someone so much and then being totally blindsided when out of nowhere they do something that totally screws you over, not understanding why. And then there's a part in the movie where like they're already going through the divorce, but they're still living together at the moment, and like she's still doing things for him even though they're not in love anymore, just because she still cares about him. And that was something that I, have gone through before too. Like we're no longer together, yet they're still making me a cup of coffee in the morning before they leave to work, just because it was routine and just because they still care even though they don't love you. And it's just like these little small fine details that were sprinkled into the movie that they were just so real. And then it was after watching it that I realized that the director of this movie actually based a lot of the experiences off of things that he went through in his divorce, which is why it felt so real. And it really hit me on such an emotional level. And Scarlett Johansson was so good in this movie, but obviously I'm going to relate to Adam Driver more. And oh my God, he is so good in this movie. It's unbelievable how real his performance is. Like, you would think he's gone through this multiple times and just honed in on exactly what it's like to go through a divorce. And I was just really so blown away by it. I actually watched it twice, because the first time I was a little intoxicated and spent most of the time crying. The second time I watched it sober, still cried a little bit, but not as much. But everything about this movie was amazing. Ray Liotta and Laura Dern, they're, lawyers that, both main characters go through during this divorce. And I don't want to give too much away, because if you haven't seen it yet, you definitely owe it to yourself, especially if you've ever been through a breakup or anything sad like that, to see this. Because it also, as sad as it sounds, this movie also highlights, that just because you go through a divorce doesn't mean you have to hate each other. You could still find ways to make it work for the greater good, especially if you have a kid. And I like when movies like this end not with a Hollywood happy ending, but it's still happy, just in a realistic way. Like, obviously these people don't fix things in the end, but they find a way to make it work for the son. And it sheds light through a cloudy day, if you will. Like, it makes you feel like in a situation that dark, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. There's always some positive thing that can come out of it. And I think it's really hard to capture that nowadays in movies. So I really commend the director for pulling it off. It deserves all of the praise it's getting. And like I said, if you haven't seen it yet, it's on Netflix. So it's 2 hours long. Just pop it in and watch it. And like I said, if you've ever gone through this, you'll relate to it almost instantly. It's that good. My number 3 favorite movie this year is 1917, the Sam Mendes who did Casino Royale war movie. But the point of the movie is it's meant to look like the entire movie happens in one take. Now, this is by no means the best war movie I have ever seen. A lot of people would argue that Saving Private Ryan is, and it is a very strong argument, but that is actually not my favorite war movie, mainly because, and I know this is a really, really debatable topic, and people do not like when I say this, but I do not like Steven Spielberg's directing of Saving Private Ryan. I know, everyone's probably freaking out right now, but I just don't like when people use close-ups too much as directors. Like, every time like combat was happening, like, he had the camera right in people's face, and I'm a huge fan of the cinematography and the choreography of a scene. I like to see everything play out. So if there's a soldier running down a field getting shot at, I don't want to see the camera in his face as he's running. I want to see the battlefield. I want to see the bullets ricocheting around him and everything like that. And every time someone would shoot somebody, it would zoom in on their face, and it's like, I want to see them picking up the rifle and shooting it. And okay, I'm veering too far off subject. Saving Private Ryan is a great movie, but I actually think Black Hawk Down is better. And then I actually think American Sniper is better. And then Saving Private Ryan, but then 1917. Anyway, the reason why I think 1917 is so good is because of this one take. The story isn't really anything that special. It's really just about these two kids that get tasked with delivering a message to a fellow battalion, quite a long distance away, that they're about to walk into an impending trap, and they need to retreat before they do that and lose like 1,500 men or like 1,700 men or something like that. And it's their journey from one base to the next and what they go through to get there. But the camera never looks like it cuts. Like, it almost looks like they literally filmed a 2-hour-long scene without ever cutting, and that was the whole movie. Obviously, they cut in there. You could tell in scenes when, like, the screen fades to black, like if they go through a tunnel or something, or if they jump in the water, or if there's an explosion, they could hide it with CGI. But for the most part, this movie blew my mind. The cinematography in this movie is unbelievable. I mean, I haven't ever seen a movie this pretty before since maybe Lawrence of Arabia. That happened in 1960, I believe that movie came out. There's one specific scene where one of the main characters is running through an abandoned city at night, and there's flares going up in the sky and casting shadows on all like the broken down buildings and everything. And my jaw, if I wasn't like holding it, would have dropped to the floor because I was that floored by it. It was just unrealistically beautiful, and the fact that Sam Mendes could pull this off was amazing. And even though the story wasn't that good and the actors didn't have a whole lot to do other than run from point A to point B, the scenes where things had to slow down and they actually had to act, they were both amazing. And there is a lot of supporting actors in this, like A-list actors that I had no idea were in this movie, and they all killed it with the 2 or 3 minutes of dialogue they get in the entire movie. The action was great, the sound editing was great, the score was great. Everything about this movie was phenomenal, really, except the story. But that's okay, because like I said, this movie didn't need it because it has this gimmick of a one-shot, and it's deserving of all of the praise it's getting. This movie better win Best Director because it absolutely deserves it. I wouldn't be surprised if it won Best Picture, but I don't know if it will win Best Picture. Pretty sure it's going to win Sam Mendes that first-time Oscar award, though, for Best Director. If you haven't seen this movie and you like war movies, go and see it as soon as possible in a movie theater before it leaves, because this is definitely a cinema experience. I always say that there are certain movies that you could watch at home that you'll get the same thing out of it at home that you would in a movie theater. Like Marriage Story. You don't need to see that on a big screen with surround sound. But movies like Fast and Furious, Transformers, superhero movies, war movies, those are all things that you need to see on a big screen with the surround sound to really experience it as the directors intended for it. So if you haven't seen this yet, you like war movies, and you like the gimmick of this whole thing being filmed like a one-take movie, kind of like how Birdman was, go and check this out as soon as possible. And now my second favorite movie of the year was Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix and directed by Todd Phillips. I was a little skeptical going into this because, I mean, look, DC's been doing right lately, but they did do Batman vs. Superman, which really kind of let me down. I did like it, but not as much as I wish I would. I did not like Justice League. They really treated Batman like shit, and I hated that because Batman's my favorite superhero of all time. I like Man of Steel. Well, actually, I love Man of Steel. That's an understatement. But, then they came out with Suicide Squad, which I thought was fun. It was a bad movie, but it was a fun movie. And granted, then they came out with Wonder Woman, which I loved. And then they came out with Aquaman. But the thing with Aquaman was, I really enjoyed Aquaman, but it was like a B-level, like cheesy action, superhero, sci-fi, adventure. It's not a bad thing. It just tonally doesn't feel like a superhero movie, if you will. It doesn't feel like it belongs in like a DC movie. And that's a good thing because, I mean, they were not going in a good direction with DC. But I was like, you know, it was only those two movies. And I was a little concerned that they still didn't have like an overall direction that they wanted to take this franchise in. But then they came out with Shazam. And Shazam blew me away. I love Shazam. It's in my top 10 favorite movies of the year, obviously. But even still, those three movies are all tonally very different, which is still kind of concerning because I'm not sure what direction they're going in. I know they said that right now they're trying to focus on just individual movies, which is fine, but one day they're going to want to tie these all in, and they're not going to mesh tonally. But only time will tell. So anyway, when I saw that Joaquin Phoenix was coming out with a Joker movie directed by Todd Phillips, who's most notably known for the Hangover trilogy, I was really concerned. Because, I mean, Todd Phillips only ever did, like, comedies. And Joaquin Phoenix has openly said he never really wanted to do a role that was, like, a superhero role or anything like that. Even though he's not playing a superhero role, like, I didn't understand why this movie was getting made. And the Joker's my favorite villain of all time. He is so good, and I just didn't get it at first. And I remember seeing set photos and thinking like the makeup kind of looked cheesy, and I couldn't figure out what they were trying to do here. Was Batman going to be in it? What's going on? Why is he so old? Because Joaquin Phoenix is kind of old, so by the time Batman grows up, he's going to be too old to fight Batman. So I just didn't get it. And then I saw the trailer for the movie, and I said to myself, I get it now. They're kind of doing their own thing. They're retconning the Joker that we know and love. Even though Joaquin Phoenix said this over and over and over, like, it didn't hit me until I saw the trailer that they were really just doing their own interpretation of what it would take to make a man in our society become someone like the Joker. And I was still nervous, but then I finally went into this movie, and I saw it 3 times in the theaters because I loved it so much. A lot of people were scared that this movie was gonna like kind of promote violence and everything like that. And I mean, look, this movie has an underlying tone where it wants the viewer to realize that this is a man that breaks down because there's no sympathy in the world. He doesn't have anyone there to really help him aside from his mother. No one's kind. You know, and it's a movie that's really promoting kindness, if anything. It's not saying everyone's going to become a killer. Unfortunately, this man was already damaged in the head. And it really just turned a killer into a killer. It was kind of always dormant, at least in my opinion. Like, he was always capable of something like this. It's just the constant turmoil he was in and bullying kind of brought it out in him. Obviously, that's not going to happen with everyone. I don't think this movie promotes that happening at all. You know, I've been miserable too, and I didn't walk out of this movie going, I'm going to kill everyone that's ever wronged me, you know? So pump the brakes on everyone that says that. Everyone needs to stop being so easily offended. Overall, I really enjoyed the message of this movie, and I really enjoyed Todd Phillips' take on this character. I thought Joaquin Phoenix was the best actor this year. His performance was mind-blowingly good. I love transformative performances. I love when actors get crazy into their role. Same thing with Christian Bale, how he'll lose or gain 100 pounds to play a role, and they just dive head first into this. And Joaquin Phoenix lost so much weight, and he really transformed himself into this character, and I was literally drooling every second he was on screen, and he's in every frame of this movie, so that was 2 hours of drooling. I was really impressed with his performance. The story was really well written. You feel bad for this guy, but then you also don't towards the end of this movie, and you kind of realize, like, wow, this guy needs to be stopped. And it's kind of scary knowing that this character is running around right now, creating all this chaos and anarchy, and there is no Batman in the world to take him down. And I think that was the point, though, because Todd Phillips was trying to really ground this movie into reality. And it really blew me away with how well Todd Phillips handled this source material. And then I started thinking, like, holy shit, maybe Warner Brothers is onto something here, because they did it with David F. Sandberg with Joker, where they took a director known for doing horror. Fun fact about David F. Sandberg, he was actually not a famous director prior to his first movie, Lights Out. He was actually found from creating YouTube videos with his wife and got hired to direct a feature-length movie for Hollywood because of how good his YouTube videos were. And it gives people like me hope that I don't need to go to college to do it as well. Anyway, they're on a trend here where they're taking directors that are known for a genre like horror or comedy and trusting them with this big blockbuster IP that they're hoping is going to make them $1 billion. And the reason why I think it works is because to make a comedy, you have to make a character piece. You have to make good dialogue, good scripts, good comedies, obviously. And the same thing with horror. You have to make something that is going to pull emotions out of people, that's going to make them feel a certain way, that's going to scare them. And you have to have that creative attention to detail. And a lot of horror movies and comedies, they're not these big blockbusters that get $150 million budgets. So where they struggle and lack in set design and action scenes and choreography, they have to make up for it with just dialogue and character pieces. And I think if you take a director that could just make two people sitting in a room talking interesting or funny or horrific, and you give them this big budget, a lot of money, that they can make a fantastic character piece movie that's also a $1 billion grossing movie with a big budget. Look at someone like Michael Bay, who comes from just creating music videos, then to Bad Boys, then to Transformers. As fun as it is to watch Michael Bay movies, it's more like going to an amusement park. It's just like going on a wild ride. The stories always suck, but the action's good, but he doesn't know how to make a compelling story. Whereas in these little indie comedy horror filmmakers have to rely on making a good story without all of that money and epic set designs and everything. So giving them the opportunity to make a big blockbuster movie seems to be always ending in a recipe for success. And I really hope Warner Brothers continues this process, because I was really blown away by it. Like I said, it's my second favorite movie of the year, and it's my favorite all-time performance of the year with Joaquin Phoenix. I hope to God he makes a sequel. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I really would love to see Todd Phillips' version of Batman fight Joaquin Phoenix's version of the Joker. If you haven't seen it yet, it's out on Blu-ray now. You can probably rent it from your Xbox store or Redbox or a library or wherever your nearest video store is near you. Definitely check this one out. It is absolutely worth it. And my number one favorite movie of the year is The Lighthouse, starring William Dafoe and the new Batman, Robert Pattinson. I saw the trailer for this movie, and instantly I was excited because this reminded me of old Hitchcock movies, which me and my buddy John are very fond of. The director of the movie previously did The Witch. I'm not too sure what else he's done, but I know that The Witch was very much so loved. I saw it. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was anything great, but it was very much so a horror movie. This didn't really strike me as a horror movie. I didn't really know what this movie was trying to be prior to seeing it. All I knew is it looked weird as heck. But I was really intrigued by the concept of just two men on a lighthouse getting cabin fever, essentially, and slowly going crazy. And I loved the set. I loved the set design, how it was in black and white, and how it was shot with old school cameras that made it feel like it was like an old 1940s movie. I went into this movie not knowing what to expect, and I walked out completely blown away. Everything about this movie was unbelievably, unrealistically amazing. The set design was amazing. The score was amazing. The camera work was amazing. The lighting is amazing. Things I didn't even know existed in movies because it's hidden behind green screens and lens flares and everything. Amazing. But overall, the biggest takeaway from this movie is a tie between the story and the acting. And the reason why I say that is because the story keeps you guessing every single second from the first frame of the movie what's real, what isn't, who's right, who's wrong, and what the hell is going on. What was that? Was that just a tentacle? Was that a mermaid? My head was literally exploding metaphorically throughout this entire movie, and I can't even tell you the last time I watched a movie that made me do that. It was like the reveal of a twist of an M. Night Shyamalan movie, like that feeling you get, those endorphins rushing around, but for 2 straight hours. I couldn't figure it out. And then the performances were, there's not even a word to describe it. Robert Pattinson was phenomenal. And I mean, look, this guy has been constantly impressing me since his Twilight days. I've seen all the Twilight movies. I don't hate them as much as most people do. Well, most of my friends, at least. But I did stereotype him into just like the pretty boy, like every girl loves him kind of actor. Then he came out with Remember Me, which I thought was pretty good. Then he came out with Water for Elephants, which I really enjoyed. And then he just kept coming out with other movies that were really blowing me away. Like these lower budgeted indie projects that were like straight to DVD. But like his acting was just so good in all of them. I think he came out with a movie called Rover, and it blew me away with how good his acting was. So I was pretty excited going to see him in this movie, especially since he's going to be my new favorite superhero, Batman. Really excited for this. But the takeaway was William Dafoe. Holy shit. The dialogue that they gave him was, I don't even know how they came up with it. I mean, that they must have read books and like had to learn lingo, because this guy would go off on a 15-minute long monologue talking in things that I couldn't even understand. I actually had to go after the movie came out and buy it on Blu-ray and rewatch it with the subtitles on. And it was only then that I fully understood what he was saying. And that's kind of an understatement, because there are still some things he says that I'm like, I don't even know what that means, and that was complete English. But it was just the way that these people used to talk back then. And the fact that this director was able to translate it so accurately onto the screen, and William Dafoe was able to capture it with such precision without messing up his lines. I can't even get through a full sentence without stuttering sometimes, and he's delivering these like ancient 1920s crazy dialects that I've never heard before, like he was born doing it, and I couldn't believe it. There's an entire segment that lasts like 10 minutes where he's pretty much just cursing out Robert Pattinson, but not the way we would curse people out, the way they would do it, talking about Greek gods and cursing into hell and all this stuff, and it's really all over the fact that Robert Pattinson didn't like his cooking that night. And the entire time it was happening, again, my jaw was to the floor, and I just couldn't believe the performance he was giving. I don't think it was necessarily as good as Joaquin Phoenix's, because, like I said, I'm a sucker for transformative. And that's not to say that William Dafoe didn't transform for this movie, because he absolutely did. But not the way that Joaquin Phoenix did, but that still doesn't undercut how good his performance was. It really blew me away. Like, not just away, but like to Kingdom Come. Like, I was gone. I left the movie theater, I got in my car, I don't even remember the drive home, because I was just so lost in thought of what the hell I just watched. I was one of those people where I came home and I had to scour the internet for people explaining to me what exactly was going on, because it was confusing. But those are the best kinds of movies that make you think when you leave the theater. And it's a mix of that, where I had to like literally research what was going on at the end, the great story and the great acting that skyrocketed this movie to my #1 spot. I've never seen anything like it. Not this year, not ever. If you haven't seen it yet and you're a huge fan of just movies in general, you have to watch this movie. It is so good, and by God, if you get it on your first try, you're a lot smarter of a person than I am. But then again, I almost didn't graduate high school, so take that with a grain of salt. Anyway, that was my top 10 list of 2019. Sorry it was a little long, but I didn't want to undercut anything. I wanted to give reasons and examples. Anyway, if you like this video, please like, please subscribe, please hit that like button, and as always, I'll catch you next time.